This is the lesson for Chapter 3, Section 1, Parallel Lines in a Transversal. And so what we have is some definitions and some terminology that we need to go over first. So first of all, we've got some parallel lines. A and B are parallel, and I know they're parallel because of this little symbol they show right here. So whenever we see those two arrows going in the same direction, that tells us that we have parallel lines. And those lines are A and line B. So we have line A and line B. And over here we have this T. Now the arrows at the end of the line just means that the lines go on forever in both directions. But the arrow in the middle of the line signifies that they're parallel, as long as we have both lines have that symbol. This little T right here says that that represents the transversal. Transversal just means that it crosses a line or lines. And so it either crosses a line or it crosses more than one line. And then we have these numbered angles, and we see that there are, when we have two parallel lines in a transversal, we have 8 different angles are made. So we have 8 angles formed from two parallel lines and a transversal. So what we're going to take a look at is some parts of those and certain angles. And so whenever we have any two angles that, or two lines that cross, we have 4 different angles that are made. And so vertical angles are always congruent. And so here's my symbol for congruent. It's an equal sign with this little tilde on top, and this means congruent. And congruent just means the same measure. So typically when we're in geometry, we use that term when we're talking about different lines being congruent or angles being congruent. They have the same measure, so they are the same. So that's where the equal sign comes in, and tilde just means similar. And so if we have congruent shapes, we're saying that they're similar and they are equal as well. So we've got angles that are congruent all the time when we're talking about vertical angles. So no matter what kind of X you make, you've got 4 angles, and 2 sets of those angles are going to end up being congruent. So let's take a look at the ones that are vertical. Vertical ones that share the same vertex but are opposite one another. Like for instance, angle 2 is congruent to angle 3, and I know those are congruent because they are vertical angles. And so some other vertical angles that we end up seeing, and I'll just list them, are angles 1 and 2, or 1 and that 75-degree angle. So we have the 75-degree angle. So angle 1 is equal to 75 in this case. And then we have angle 5 and 7. And then we have angles 6 and angle 4. Those are my sets of vertical angles. Corresponding angles are only going to end up being, so these 3 right here are only congruent if lines are parallel. And if they're not parallel, then they would not be congruent. They might still be corresponding, but they won't be congruent. And that's what we're really looking for. So the lines parallel help us find different angles. We'll see that later on. And these different situations, whether it be corresponding alternate interior or exterior, help us find different angles as long as we have parallel lines. So the corresponding angles are ones in the same location. Like for instance, 2 and 5 are corresponding. Angle 2 and 5 correspond because they are in the same location with respect to the transversal, both up and left of their respective parallel line. The 75-degree angle and the angle 6, those are corresponding because they're in the upper right-hand corner. 1 and 4 are corresponding. Angle 1 and angle 4, they're both in the lower left. And then 3 and 7 correspond also. So angle 3 and angle 7 are corresponding. Now, alternate interior interior means inside. And so we have to look for the lines that are inside the parallel line. So this is the interior here. Interior. So this is the interior. This is also the interior, where this would be the exterior out here. This would be the exterior. We'd have exterior over here and exterior over here. And so when I'm talking about alternate interior, I'm talking about alternate sides of the transversal. So for instance, angle 4 and that 75-degree angle, those are alternate interior angles, where 3 and 5 are also alternate interior angles, angle 3 and angle 5. Exterior means outside again, and so those are outside the parallel lines, and they're on alternate sides of the transversal, so like 2 and 7. So angle 2 and angle 7 are going to end up being alternate exterior, along with angle 1 and 6. Angle 1 and angle 6. And so those are different terminologies that help us figure out whether angles are the same or not, whether they're congruent. And let's take a look at the congruent angles real quick. So ones that are congruent, we'll say angle 2 is congruent to all the other angles that are those obtuse angles. So for instance, the vertical angle 3, it's congruent to that. It's also congruent to angle 5, which is corresponding to it. And it's also congruent to angle 7, which is alternate exterior. And for angle 1 is congruent to the other 4 angles. It's congruent to the 75-degree angle, because those are vertical. It's congruent to 4, because those are corresponding. And it's also congruent to angle 6, because those are alternate exterior angles. And so we're going to solve some problems given this, using this information. Let's take a look at some that we might see. So here it says use the figure to find the measure of the numbered angles. Alright, so I know these lines are parallel because of this sign, that symbol right there, that tells me that I have parallel lines. So if they're parallel, then I can use my different theories. I can use alternate interior. I can use, I'm going to abbreviate there, alternate exterior angles. I can use corresponding angles. So once I know those angles are the same, then I can end up using one of these 3 ways of finding out other angles. So for instance, 112 degrees, that is outside the parallel line. Angle 1 is outside the parallel line. They're on alternate sides, opposite sides of the transversal. So I could say angle 1 equals 112 degrees, because those are alternate exterior angles. Now angle 2 and angle 1 are called supplementary. Angle 1 and 2 are supplementary angles. And supplementary means that they add, so this word right here means that they sum to 180 degrees. So what I can do is I know angle 1 is 112. Don't know what angle 2 is yet, but I know they add to make 180 degrees. So all I have to do is subtract 112 from both sides, and that would give me what angle 2 is. So I go ahead and borrow a little bit, and that gives me 68 degrees. So angle 2 is 68 degrees, where angle 1 is 112 degrees. So let's take a look at this one. Here it says we got to find all the numbered angles. So we're given this is 34. So I could say that angle 2 equals 34 degrees because it is vertical. Vertical to given. It's vertical to the given angle. Angle 4 is also 34 degrees because it is alternate interior. Alternate interior to given. And I could say angle 6 is equal to 34 degrees because it is corresponding to given. To the given angle is what I'm talking about. And then I'm moving on to the other ones. So angle 1 is equal to 180 minus 34. I have to subtract those two numbers because angle 1 and 34 equal 180 degrees. So when I subtract those two angles, I end up with 6, and I have to borrow a little bit, so that makes 4 and 1. So 146 degrees is angle 1. And so if that's the case, we could end up saying that angle 3 is equal to 146 degrees because it is vertical to angle 1. And then angle 7 is equal to 146 degrees because it is corresponding to angle 1, and we could say angle 5 is also equal to 146 degrees because it is alternate exterior to angle 1. And so those are some different types of problems that we're going to end up experiencing on tonight's homework. Good luck.